On the morning of January 11, 1992, a couple were driving toward a military training area located near Madison, Indiana, in the United States. Their plan was to take advantage of the early morning light to go bird hunting, but what they encountered was far from what they expected. As they drove along the road, they noticed a strange smell and saw smoke rising from an area nearby. Curiosity got the best of them, so they pulled over to investigate what they initially thought was a mannequin. However, it was not a discarded prop. What they had stumbled upon was the partially burned body of a young woman. Her body was positioned as if she had been trying to defend herself, suggesting she had endured severe mistreatment before her tragic end. Shanda Sharer was born on June 6, 1979, in Kentucky. Her parents, Stephen and Jacqueline, separated not long after her birth. Jacqueline eventually remarried, and Shanda moved with her to Louisville, where she attended St. Paul's School through the 6th grade. Shanda had a passion for sports, playing on the volleyball and softball teams, and she was also a cheerleader. In 1991, Jacqueline's second marriage ended, and they relocated to New Albany, Indiana, where Shanda enrolled at Hazelwood Middle School. However, after a few months, Jacqueline decided to transfer her to a Catholic school, Our Lady of Perpetual Help School. The decision stemmed from Jacqueline's concern over a particular friendship Shanda had developed, specifically with a girl named Melinda Lovelace. Melinda was born on October 28, 1975, in New Albany, to parents Marjorie and Larry Lovelace, who already had other children. Melinda's childhood was far from ideal. Her father, Larry, had returned from military service in Vietnam, traumatized, and began working irregularly for the Southern Railway. By 1972, he became a supervisor at the New Albany Police Department but was dismissed after only 8 months for attacking an African-American man whom he accused of having an affair with his wife. Despite the family's financial struggles, Marjorie contributed enough to maintain their lifestyle. However, Larry began to squander money on cars, motorcycles, and firearms, leaving little for his daughters. The situation deteriorated, and by 1980, they declared bankruptcy. This forced Melinda and her sisters to endure hunger and rely on relatives for food. Larry and Marjorie frequented bars, where Larry pretended to be more successful than he was, introducing Marjorie as his girlfriend and suggesting she be shared with others. This caused strain on their marriage, and after an attempted suicide by Marjorie, the couple briefly turned to religion, joining a Baptist church and giving up alcohol. However, they soon returned to their old habits, with Larry becoming more abusive. Melinda, deeply affected by these events, grew increasingly troubled. By age 9, she witnessed her mother attempting to drown herself following abuse. Larry's behavior worsened, with Melinda and her sisters often overhearing their mother's cries for help. In one violent incident in 1986, Larry beat Marjorie so severely that she ended up in the hospital. By the early 1990s, Melinda had become deeply troubled, and in 1990, at age 15, she entered into a romantic relationship with a fellow student, Amanda, a talented athlete. However, when Melinda came out as gay the following year, her mother was initially furious but eventually came to accept it. Things took a turn for the worse when Amanda became friends with a new student, Shanda Scherer. Melinda's jealousy grew, convinced that Shanda was to blame for the strain on her relationship with Amanda. Despite efforts to distance Shanda from Melinda, the tension escalated. In January 1992, Melinda began plotting her revenge, fueled by anger and resentment over Shanda's friendship with Amanda. On January 10th of that year, Lori Tackett, 17, met up with her two friends, Tony Lawrence and Hope Anna Rippey, both 15. Neither Tony nor Hope had ever met Melinda or Shanda in person, but they were aware they were going to scare Shanda that night. None of the girls felt guilty about the plan, as they were all dealing with their own personal issues. Mary Lorene Lori Tackett was born on October 5, 1974, in Madison, Indiana, to a strict Pentecostal Christian mother and a factory worker father who had a criminal record. Lori's childhood was tough. She suffered sexual abuse between the ages of 5 and 12. In May 1989, Lori's mother found out that she had been changing into jeans at school, which enraged her. Instead of discussing it calmly, her mother attempted to strangle her. This led to social workers getting involved and making unannounced visits to ensure Lori was safe. However, the relationship between Lori and her mother never improved. At one point, after learning that Hope Rippey's father had bought the girls a Ouija board, Lori's mother stormed over to their house and demanded they burn it and perform an exorcism. By that time, Lori's rebellious behavior had become evident. At 15, she developed an obsession with the occult, telling friends that she was possessed by Diana the vampire while engaging in self-harm. Desperate for help, Lori's parents admitted her to the hospital on March 19, 1991. After being prescribed antidepressants, Lori was discharged but attempted suicide only 48 hours later. She was readmitted, where she admitted to having hallucinations since childhood. She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Lori left the hospital on April 12, 1991. By September, she dropped out of school and moved in with friends. However, she eventually returned to live with her parents when they promised to buy her a car. Despite this, Lori continued to spend most of her time in New Albany with Melinda and her other friends, Hope and Tony, who shared troubled pasts. Hope Anna Rippey, born June 9, 1976 in Madison, had also endured significant hardship. Her parents divorced in February 1984, and she moved to Michigan with her mother and other relatives, experiencing numerous difficult situations. When her parents reconciled in 1987, Hope returned to Madison and reconnected with Lori and Tony. Like her friends, Hope began self-harming at 15. Tony Lawrence, born February 14, 1976 in Madison, had her own tragic story. She was sexually abused by a family member at age 9 and assaulted by a teenage boy when she was 14. Though police issued a restraining order, Tony began therapy but didn't continue. Instead, she followed her friend's lead into self-harm and, by 8th grade, attempted suicide. When Lori, Tony, and Hope arrived at Melinda's house, Melinda showed them a knife and explained her plan to scare Shanda. During the drive to Shanda's house, Melinda vented about her anger toward Shanda, calling her a copycat and blaming her for the troubles in her relationship with Amanda. The girls all agreed that Shanda needed to be taught a lesson. Upon reaching Shanda's house, Hope and Tony went to the door, posing as Amanda's friends and inviting Shanda to go with them to the witch's castle, where Amanda was supposedly waiting. Shanda hesitated, saying her parents were still awake, but agreed to go with them later, around midnight. Melinda was frustrated that the plan had to be delayed, but Hope and Tony convinced her to wait. The group then attended a punk rock concert, but while Lori and Melinda enjoyed the show, Hope and Tony grew bored and ended up having sexual encounters with two boys in Lori's car. Afterward, they returned to Shanda's house around midnight. When they returned, Hope convinced Shanda to come with them, saying Amanda was still waiting at the witch's castle. After a moment of hesitation, Shanda changed her clothes and got into the car, where she came face to face with Melinda, who had been hiding in the back seat. Melinda pulled a knife and began interrogating Shanda about her relationship with Amanda. The group drove toward the witch's castle, a creepy, run-down stone structure on a desolate hill by the Ohio River. As they neared the site, Melinda told Shanda about a local legend in which 9 witches had once lived in the castle and were burned alive by the townspeople. Melinda warned that Shanda's ghost might be the next to haunt the place. When they arrived, the girls forced Shanda out of the car and dragged her into the castle while she cried. They tied her up and began tormenting her. Melinda took Shanda's jewelry and distributed it among the girls, while Hope mocked Shanda, dancing to the ticking of her Mickey Mouse watch. Lori set fire to a shirt as they continued to taunt their victim. Fearing they might be seen by passing cars, the group decided to relocate. Lori suggested a garbage dump in a more secluded area. By this time, Tony and Hope were growing uncomfortable and refused to leave the car. Melinda and Lori, however, continued their attack. They forced Shanda to undress and brutally beat her. Melinda repeatedly kneed Shanda in the face, causing her braces to cut into her lips. Despite Shanda's attempts to fight back, the girls overpowered her. Melinda then tried to slit Shanda's throat, but the knife was too dull. When Shanda continued to struggle, Hope got out of the car to help restrain her. Together, Melinda and Lori took turns stabbing her and beating her with a metal rod. After tying a rope around Shanda's neck and choking her until she lost consciousness, they threw her into the car's trunk, believing she was dead. The girls returned to Lori's house, where they cleaned themselves up and drank sodas. Suddenly, they heard Shanda's screams coming from the trunk. Realizing she was still alive, Lori grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her for 2 minutes before returning inside, now covered in blood. She showered and, as if nothing had happened, read her friends' fortunes. Later, Lori and Melinda took another drive with Shanda still in the trunk. Again, they heard her cries. When they opened the trunk, they saw Shanda, barely alive, sitting up and covered in blood. Though she tried to speak, she couldn't, but her eyes rolled back in a horrifying sight. Frustrated that Shanda still hadn't died, Lori grabbed the same iron rod they had used earlier and began hitting her until she lost consciousness again. As the sun began to rise, Melinda and Lori returned to Lori's house, where Hope and Tony asked what had happened. Lori, laughing, recounted the events of the night. The noise woke Lori's mother, who started yelling at her, scolding her for staying out so late and questioning why there were so many girls in her room. Lori assured her mother that she would drive all her friends home. Once they were back in the car, the group stopped at a gas station. There they filled up the tank and bought a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi. But it wasn't for drinking. Lori emptied the bottle and refilled it with gasoline. The crime was about to reach its conclusion. They drove to a secluded area and opened the trunk to check on Shanda, who, to their surprise, was still alive. Melinda taunted her rival, saying, "You don't look so sexy now, do you?" Lori and Hope then wrapped Shanda in a blanket and drove her to a remote spot called Lemon Road. Hope doused her in gasoline from the bottle, and they watched as her body caught fire. Still fearing that Shanda might somehow survive, Melinda wanted to be certain this time. She returned with more gasoline, and Shanda's body burned one final time. In total, they had tortured her for nearly 10 hours. Afterward, at around 9:30 a.m., the four girls, now murderers, stopped at a McDonald's for breakfast. There, they made fun of a sausage patty, comparing it to Shanda's burned body after the brutal attacks. Lori then dropped off Tony and Hope at their homes before returning to hers with Melinda, who helped clean the car with a hose. It wasn't until 3 p.m. that Melinda finally went home, completely drained from the ordeal. She immediately called her ex-girlfriend, Amanda, and bragged about what had happened. Amanda didn't believe her and downplayed the situation. Later, Melinda told another friend, Crystal, about the murder and even took her and Lori to pick up Amanda to show her the blood-stained trunk. Melinda convinced Amanda not to go to the authorities, sealing her silence with a kiss, hoping to pass off the murder as a twisted act of true love. Meanwhile, that same morning, Shanda's father realized his daughter was missing. After calling neighbors and friends, he contacted his ex-wife, and by 1:45 p.m., the couple arrived at the Clark County Sheriff's Office to report Shanda's disappearance. What they didn't know was that earlier that morning someone had come across a gruesome sight. As they drove to the Jefferson Proving Ground to hunt quail, they noticed a strange object by the side of the road. Initially, they thought it was a discarded mannequin, but when they got out of their vehicle, they discovered the charred body of a girl. They quickly called the police, who arrived at 10:55 a.m. The officers observed that the body had been deliberately positioned and that the face and hands had been severely burned, likely in an attempt to make the victim unrecognizable. The police began collecting forensic evidence, initially suspecting that the crime might have been drug-related. They didn't think locals, let alone 4 teenage girls, could have committed such a crime. However, the truth would soon be revealed. That same afternoon, Tony and Hope could no longer bear the weight of their secret. They confessed everything to their parents, and by 8:20 p.m., they were at the police station giving a full account of the horrific events, including the names of the other 2 involved. They were immediately placed under arrest. Detectives quickly connected the dots. The missing girl reported earlier in the day had to be the same victim that Tony, Hope, and their friends had killed. The police went to Shanda's home to collect her dental records, which confirmed that the body found by the roadside was indeed hers. Melinda and Lori were arrested on January 12th. Mugshots showed a smiling Melinda, seemingly unconcerned about the situation, while Tony appeared anxious, fully aware of the gravity of what they had done. The prosecutor swiftly announced that all 4 girls would be tried as adults, making them eligible for the death penalty. During the trial, forensic experts revealed the horrifying details of the crime. Shanda had been tied up at the wrists and ankles, beaten repeatedly with a blunt object, stabbed in the chest, slashed on her legs, and sexually assaulted with a sharp object. The cause of death was determined to be smoke inhalation and burns. Despite the overwhelming evidence, not everyone viewed the girls as monsters. Teachers from their schools expressed shock, describing Tony and Hope as well-behaved students, some even above average. Lori's former teacher described her as a student with good values and deep religious faith. Classmates simply said the girls were a bit odd and often wore black. The defense attorneys capitalized on these character references, highlighting the troubled backgrounds of each girl. All four had endured physical or sexual abuse at the hands of a parent or another adult. Additionally, Tony, Hope, and Lori had a history of self-harm, while Melinda had the most extensive record of aggressive behavior and mental health issues. Their lawyers argued that the girls' psychological conditions were contributing factors to the violent act. In the end, Lori and Melinda were sentenced to 60 years in prison. Tony received a 20-year sentence, while Hope's sentence was initially 50 years, later reduced to 35 due to a plea agreement. Although they avoided the death penalty, the consequences of their actions would ripple far beyond their prison sentences. During Melinda's testimony, it was revealed that her father, Larry, had abused his wife, daughters, and other children. He was arrested in February 1993 on charges of abuse, sodomy, and sexual assault. Although he was imprisoned for 2 years, most of the charges were eventually dropped due to the statute of limitations, and he was released after pleading guilty to a single charge. In 1998, at the age of 52, Larry committed suicide by stepping in front of a school bus. Tony was the first of the four to be released from prison in 2000. Meanwhile, Shanda's family continued to suffer. Her father, Steve, turned to alcohol after his daughter's murder and died in 2005 from cirrhosis of the liver at the age of 53. He was buried next to Shanda. Shanda's mother, Jackie, tried to move forward and, in April 2006, agreed to donate a dog named Angel to Melinda, who had been working in a canine assistance program training service dogs for people with disabilities. Jackie was harshly criticized for her decision, but she maintained that she wanted something good to come out of the tragedy, believing it was what Shanda would have wanted. In 2012, a documentary titled Charity Scar followed Jackie's journey as she helped Melinda train the dog in Shanda's memory. Despite forgiving Melinda, Jackie remained angry with Amanda, believing that her daughter wouldn't have been killed if not for Melinda's jealousy over Amanda's relationship with Shanda. Jackie also believed Amanda was partially to blame, accusing her of having a sexual relationship with the underage Shanda and knowing about Melinda's intent to kill but doing nothing to stop it. On January 11, 2018, Lori was released from prison, having served nearly 26 years. She completed a year of parole afterward. Melinda was also released in 2019 after serving time in the Indiana Women's Prison, following which she completed a year of probation. The horrific torture and murder of Shanda underscores the cruelty that adolescents can be capable of, but it also highlights the devastating impact of growing up in dysfunctional homes. Had Lori, Melinda, Tony, and Hope not experienced abuse throughout their childhoods, Shanda might still be alive today. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On a quiet October afternoon in 2005, a tragic accident shattered the lives of everyone involved. 14-month-old Kyle Lazarchuk was found unresponsive in his home, his tiny body marked with mysterious injuries. The young nanny, Ada Quadros, frantically dialed 911, but what happened next would change her life forever. As paramedics raced to the scene, the grim reality of Kyle's condition became evident. Despite Ada's desperate attempts to save him, the baby's injuries were severe. But what could have caused such a tragedy? The answers seemed elusive. Ada Quadros was born on September 13, 1977, in the coastal town of Chimbote, Peru. She was the first child of Victor Quadros, a veterinarian, and Luz Fernandez, a teacher. Ada was the eldest of four siblings and consistently excelled academically, even winning knowledge contests. She had a happy childhood filled with dreams of self-improvement. Ada later recounted that she spent much of her childhood with one of her sisters on their grandparents' farm, enjoying the close connection with nature and animals. This period was one of the happiest times of her life. Although Ada's family wasn't poor, they were not wealthy either. During her teenage years, she looked for ways to contribute financially. Together with her sister and a friend, she formed a group to entertain at children's parties. After high school, Ada enrolled in a private university to study law. Unfortunately, her financial situation did not allow her to continue, and she had to drop out. Despite this setback, Ada was determined to succeed and support her family. With this goal in mind, she applied for a U.S. visa through the lottery program. Like many young people from Peru and other Latin American countries, Ada saw the United States as a land of opportunities. She was determined to move there, work hard, earn a better income, and pave the way for a brighter future for herself and her family. Her family was thrilled for her. They sold some belongings and did everything possible to gather enough money for her journey. Her destination was Texas, where she initially planned to stay with some relatives. In early 2004, she began working as a waitress in a restaurant. After some time, she joined a company that placed nannies in households. This is how she met the Lazarkic family. The Lazarkic family consisted of Father Michael, commonly known as Mike, Mother Renee, their eldest daughter Alyssa, and twin boys Ryan and Kyle. Little is known about the family's background except that they married in 2000. Shortly after their wedding, Renee became pregnant with their first daughter, Alyssa. Just 4 months after Alyssa's birth, Renee was expecting again, this time with twins Kyle and Ryan. The Lazarkic couple wanted to hire a trustworthy nanny to take care of the twins when Renee returned to work. Alyssa was already comfortable in a daycare she attended daily, where she had made several friends, so they decided she would continue going there. The couple interviewed several candidates, and Ada stood out as the best option. At 27 years old, she was young but not a teenager. She appeared healthy, strong, well-mannered, and cheerful. Renee wanted Ada to start immediately so she could spend a few weeks with her, explaining the household routines, where things were, and what was expected of her. She also wanted to observe how Ada handled the young twins, who were just over a year old. The family had one specific request. They needed assurance that Ada could commit to staying with them for 18 months, and Ada committed to this arrangement. Initially, it was agreed that she would only spend the day at the Lazarkic household, but after some time, they asked her to live in, and Ada agreed. From then on, she only left on weekends to stay at her uncle's house. Everything seemed to go smoothly. The Lazarkic family was pleased with Ada's work and grew fond of her, trusting her completely. Numerous photos captured happy moments with the smiling young nanny holding the twins. However, everything changed in the summer of 2005. Ada informed the Lazarkic family that her uncles were returning to Peru before moving on to Germany. Ada was prepared to go with them and had already purchased her plane ticket for October 29th of that year. Understandably, this was disappointing news for the couple since it was not what they had agreed upon. Eventually, they understood and only asked Ada to stay until they could find a replacement. They even requested her help in searching for and selecting her successor. Ada agreed, but from that point on, she no longer stayed overnight at the Lazarkic home. Instead, she returned to her uncle's house each night and came back early in the morning. Given the change in circumstances and Ada's impending departure, the Lazarkick family scheduled interviews with several nanny candidates for Wednesday, October 12th. During the day, Renee called Ada and asked her to prepare macaroni and cheese for the children. Ada complied and fed the kids. When Renee returned home, she greeted her children, saw they were well, and after interviewing the candidates, spent over an hour with her little ones before they went to bed. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, at 5 a.m. on Thursday, October 13th, Kyle woke up crying, which was unusual. The twins were typically heavy sleepers and never woke up on their own. It always took someone to wake them. Nonetheless, Renee got up, went to the twins' room, picked up Kyle, and soothed him until he fell back asleep. She then returned to bed. 2 hours later, at 7:30, Mike went to the children's room, woke them up, hugged and kissed them, and left them in Ada's care before heading to work. Renee woke up just before 9:30 and spent some time with the twins. She changed Ryan's diaper, said goodbye to both him and Kyle, and left for work. The children were fine, with nothing out of the ordinary except Kyle's early wake-up. That day, their older sister Alyssa went to daycare as usual. But things took a dramatic turn around 1 p.m. when Ada called 911, highly agitated, saying that one of the children, Kyle, had stopped breathing and was turning blue. After providing the address, the operator gave Ada instructions to perform CPR on the child. Ada followed the instructions while paramedics were on their way. A few minutes later, they arrived at the house and took over Kyle's care. They asked Ada what had happened, and she, very distressed, explained that after lunch, she had put Kyle in his crib and returned to get his brother. But when she got back with Ryan, Kyle started vomiting and stopped breathing. While paramedics attended to Kyle, Ada called Renee to inform her of the situation, giving her a different version of events. She said that after feeding the children, she took Kyle out of his high chair and, as usual, placed him on the playroom floor while she fetched his brother. But when she returned, Kyle was vomiting. She went to the kitchen to get a bowl to catch the vomit, and when she returned, Kyle had fallen. She said she picked him up, took him to the sink, and performed the maneuver Renee had taught her in case one of the children stopped breathing. But it didn't work, and she also attempted CPR. After initial treatment, the paramedics transported Kyle to the nearest hospital. When Renee arrived at the house, the ambulance with her son had already left, but the police were still at the scene. Renee took Ryan, the other twin, and asked Ada to accompany them. They followed the police, who escorted them to the hospital. During the drive, Renee called her husband and they met at the medical center. A few minutes later, the doctors decided to transfer Kyle by helicopter to the Dallas Children's Hospital. The Lazarkicks returned home, left Ada to care for Ryan, and headed to the Dallas Children's Hospital. Ada asked them to keep her informed about Kyle's condition. On the way to the hospital, Renee started worrying that Ada might be too nervous to look after Ryan properly, so she called a friend to assist the nanny at the house. Shortly after, her friend arrived at the house. Ada, visibly distressed and crying, opened the door for her. She asked Ada to explain what had happened. According to her account, Ada said that Kyle was standing between the playroom and the kitchen when he suddenly collapsed. Ada claimed she dropped a plate she was holding, picked Kyle up, took him to the living room, and performed CPR on him. She recalled Ada mentioning that Kyle's brain hadn't fully developed and that this issue had started at birth. She didn't fully understand, but Ada kept talking, saying she loved Kyle and would never hurt him. She tried to calm the very upset nanny, reassuring her that she hadn't done anything wrong and that she was a good person. Meanwhile, at the Dallas Children's Hospital, the Lazarkick family received devastating news. The doctor in charge of Kyle reported that the child had suffered severe head injuries, with multiple bruises on his head, arm, and left shoulder. A neurosurgeon met with the distressed parents to explain that something had to be done to relieve the pressure on Kyle's brain, though survival was unlikely. A child abuse specialist who also met with Mike and Renee suggested that Kyle's injuries could be consistent with abuse. The specialist stated that Kyle's injuries were so severe, it was as if he had been in a car accident or fallen from a sixth floor. Initially, Renee couldn't believe it. She thought Ada might have accidentally dropped the child or was too scared or ashamed to admit it. But the doctors clearly explained the extent of Kyle's head injuries and the force required to cause them. With this information, the possibility of an accident seemed implausible. Renee immediately called another friend to pick up Ryan and take him away from the house. While this was happening at the hospital, Ada became increasingly anxious at home. Renee's friend had to leave to pick up her son from school and take him home. During her absence, Ada called her several times, asking if there was any news about Kyle. When Renee's friend returned to the house, she found Ada calm. Ada was no longer crying or talking. Shortly after, a police car drove by the house. Upon seeing it, Ada lost her composure. She began crying uncontrollably and shouting, "No, no, no!" She collapsed to the floor behind a door, repeatedly insisting she would never harm Kyle. Two female detectives arrived to interview Ada as the person who had called 911 about the injured child. She had been the only adult present when the incident occurred. As the detectives located the house and got out of their patrol car, they heard Ada's cries. Upon entering, they found her extremely agitated. When Ada was able to speak, she explained that she had taken Kyle out of his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor. She was patting his back to help him burp when he suddenly began to vomit. Ada said she went to the kitchen to get a container to catch the vomit, as Renee disliked stains on the floor. While she was cleaning, Kyle turned blue, fell, and started convulsing. She claimed she took him to the living room, called 911, and followed the dispatcher's instructions. During the interview, the other officer called the hospital to get an update on Kyle's condition. When they discovered the diagnosis, detectives told Ada that her story did not account for the injuries Kyle had. Ada suggested that Kyle might have hit his head when he fell after she left him alone in the playroom. But the officers noted that the playroom floor was covered with soft rugs, making this explanation unlikely. Trying to offer another explanation, Ada said that Kyle might have hit his head on the door frame when she carried him on her hip. At the officer's insistence, Ada demonstrated how Kyle could have been hurt and mentioned that Mike and Renee often bumped Kyle's head without any problems. The officer checked the spot where Ada claimed Kyle hit his head but found no evidence of a strong impact. When the officers told her that the injury didn't seem severe enough to cause the extensive damage the doctors described, Ada insisted that the impact was strong because she was running with Kyle in her arms. She also stated that she had never shaken or hit either of the twins. The officers urged Ada to tell the truth, as it could save Kyle's life, but Ada provided no further explanation. Given the circumstances, the officers reported the situation to their command and took Ada into preventive custody for further questioning. Meanwhile, crime scene investigation units arrived to examine the house. After completing their task, they informed Renee's friend, who had stayed at the house on behalf of the owners, that they could clean up and organize everything for the family's return. While several friends cleaned the house, they found a piece of adhesive tape sticking out from the door of a cabinet under the kitchen island. When they opened the door, they noticed it was broken and held together by tape. As a result, opening it caused the door to become misaligned. They simply placed it back and secured it with the tape, but found it strange because Renee was always careful with broken items to prevent the children from getting hurt. They had a hunch and called the police to report the door. Shortly after, investigators returned to collect potential evidence. Later, when questioned about the cabinet door, Renee stated that she frequently used that door and had never seen it held with adhesive tape. By Friday, October 14th, all of Mike and Renee's hopes had vanished. The doctors informed them that Kyle was brain dead and had no chance of recovery. Amid indescribable pain, the couple authorized the removal of life support, after which Kyle passed away. 3 days later, on October 17th, the detectives interviewed Ada in prison, where she was accused of premeditated assault on a minor. This time, Ada claimed that the day before the incident, she was preparing the macaroni and cheese that Renee had requested. She had Kyle sitting on the kitchen counter, and the child fell, landing headfirst on the kitchen floor and hitting his head hard. Ada said she picked him up and checked for injuries. The only thing she noticed was redness on his ear and the right side of his head, so she applied cold compresses and gave him a pain reliever. When the interrogators asked why she hadn't told this to the other officers, Ada said she thought they wouldn't believe her. She mentioned that she didn't tell Renee because when she arrived home from work, she complained of a severe headache. Ada said Renee suffered from migraines and had requested that the lights be turned off and the house be kept quiet. The interrogators asked if she had fallen with the child, which she adamantly denied. During that interrogation, Ada learned that Kyle had died, and she cried for the rest of the interview. Ada was brought before the courts, where a judge charged her with aggravated homicide and set bail at $750,000, which was beyond the means of Ada or her family, so she remained in custody until the trial. At that time, the police indicated that she might be charged with premeditated actions, which could carry the death penalty. The case of Kyle's death went to trial in the second half of 2005. The doctor who examined Kyle at Dallas Children's Hospital testified that when he received Kyle, the child was already unconscious. He described multiple hematomas on the right side of Kyle's head, as well as bruises on the left side of his head and shoulder and both arms. Additionally, there were 2 small hemorrhages forming hematomas on the right temple. Kyle had 3 main areas of hematomas on his head, indicating 3 separate impacts. He added that the bruises were relatively recent, one possibly 12 to 16 hours old. Internally, Kyle had brain and retinal bleeding, indicative of severe trauma, even though there were no broken bones. The brain tissue was notably swollen, and the pressure inside Kyle's head was 90 millimeters of mercury, whereas the normal level is 20 millimeters. Based on these findings, he concluded that Kyle had suffered severe traumatic events consistent with blunt force trauma, possibly from someone hitting his head against a hard object. He suggested the type of injuries could result from shaking and swinging a young child's head against a solid object, like a kitchen cabinet door. A Dallas County forensic expert testified that the autopsy revealed multiple overlapping small hematomas on Kyle's scalp, along with a couple of punctate abrasions on the right temple, separated by over a centimeter. There were also 4 or 5 pairs of similar lesions on his head. His brain showed significant hemorrhage and swelling, with retinal hemorrhages in both eyes, requiring substantial force to cause such injuries. She concluded that the cause of death was severe head injuries from blunt force trauma, agreeing that Kyle's head might have been struck multiple times against the wooden door of the kitchen cabinet. She ruled out the possibility that Kyle had merely bumped into a door frame or fallen from the kitchen counter. Another critical testimony came from a forensic analyst who measured the distance between the fasteners on the broken kitchen cabinet door and found it matched the punctate abrasions on Kyle's head. This expert also analyzed the adhesive tape used to repair the cabinet door and discovered 2 DNA traces, one of which had a much higher contribution and matched Ada's DNA. The lesser trace could not be identified. After hearing from the experts, it was Mike's turn to testify. He stated that Kyle was fine on the night of October 12th and the morning of October 13th with no bruises. He also mentioned that he prepared breakfast that morning, opening and closing the kitchen cabinet doors to get utensils and food, and that all doors were in perfect condition, including the one later found inexplicably repaired with tape. The parents shared that they had breakfast with the children and played with blocks, with the twins crawling around a playhouse. Based on all the evidence, it was easy to conclude that the events leading to Kyle's death occurred when no other adults were in the house except Ada. The case prosecutor stated that the exact circumstances of what happened to Kyle might never be known for sure, but based on the evidence presented at trial, she painted a possible scenario. Perhaps Kyle didn't want to eat his lunch, and Ada, feeling frustrated or distracted by watching a soap opera, might have taken him out of his high chair without noticing the cabinet door was open. The prosecutor speculated that Ada's rage might have triggered the vicious attack on Kyle's head using the cabinet door until it broke, with the door's screws leaving marks on the child. After all the testimonies and closing arguments, the jury went to deliberate. Upon returning, they found Ada Quadros guilty of capital murder of a child under 6 years old. As the verdict was read, Ada's mother, Luz Fernandez, who had traveled from Peru when her daughter was arrested, stood up and shouted that she would free Ada because she was innocent. She proclaimed that there was no evidence to convict her daughter and vowed to start over and appeal. After the jury members left, Kyle's parents showed photographs and videos of their deceased son, recounting his brief 14 months of life from birth to the last photo taken days before his death. Family members spoke about Kyle, while others simply couldn't stop crying. Ada was sentenced the following year in 2006 to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For Ada and her family, giving up was not an option. Her parents immediately started a campaign to appeal the sentence, arguing that Ada's conviction was based on racial prejudice and ineffective public defense. However, appealing required money for legal representation and process costs, which the family did not have. Undeterred, they sought support from various sources, including the Peruvian government, the Peruvian and Latino communities in the United States, and solidarity organizations in Peru. In prison, Ada maintained her innocence and took every opportunity for interviews to assert it. Their persistence paid off, and in 2009, Ada's legal representation filed an appeal, citing 5 specific errors in the initial trial. After reviewing the case, the appeals court dismissed 3 of the claims but agreed with 2. This was enough for the judges to overturn the conviction and annul the trial due to irregularities. Following this decision, Ada's family began another fundraising effort to cover the $100,000 needed for a new trial. It took another 3 years to prepare for the new trial, which began on July 10, 2012, with the selection of 12 jurors from over 100 candidates. The trial took place in Collin County's Justice Hall. The defense argued that Kyle had fallen from the kitchen counter on October 12th, injuring his head, and the situation worsened the next day when Ada, running with the child in her arms, accidentally struck his head on the doorframe. This time, the defense presented testimony from a forensic expert with 40 years of experience. He suggested that some of Kyle's bruises might have been caused at the hospital during catheter insertion to assess brain swelling. The prosecution fiercely challenged this testimony. David Gardner, an employee of the kitchen cabinet manufacturer, also testified for the defense. He proposed alternative explanations for the broken cabinet door, though he didn't entirely rule out that Kyle's head could have been struck against it. A poignant moment in the trial was Mike's testimony, where he described Kyle's last 2 days connected to numerous tubes and machines, eventually being taken off life support and dying in his parents' arms. The defense argued there wasn't enough evidence to convict Ada, but the prosecution highlighted the medical findings and the numerous times Ada changed her story. After the sessions concluded, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, even requesting to listen to the 911 call recordings again. Ultimately, they once again found Ada Quadros, then 33, guilty of capital murder and sentenced her to life imprisonment without parole. Back in prison, Ada joined the prison volleyball team, learned Braille, and won an art contest with a drawing of the Virgin Mary, which she auctioned to raise funds for a new appeal. Ada, from her cell, maintains her innocence, her spirit unbroken as she and her family continue their fight for an appeal, seeking a chance to prove what they believe to be the truth. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Tyler Schmidt was born on November 13, 1979, in Iowa, USA. He grew up in Cedar Falls, a city known for being home to the University of Northern Iowa. From a young age, Tyler joined the Boy Scouts, where he achieved the esteemed rank of Eagle Scout. This experience ignited his lifelong love for nature and camping. Tyler especially enjoyed the camps organized by the Lutheran Church, which encouraged family gatherings. While he learned to play the trumpet in his free time, his true passion lay in adventure and sports. He participated in cross-country running and was a member of the swim team at Northern Iowa High School in Cedar Falls. Additionally, he enjoyed canoeing, hiking, and snowshoeing. His interest in computing led him to Missouri, where he studied computer science at Truman State University. There, he not only earned his degree but also met Sarah, who would later become his wife. Sarah was born on March 27, 1980, in Kansas City. She spent part of her childhood near St. Louis with her siblings Karen, Jane, and Adam. Sarah shared Tyler's love for outdoor activities, especially bird watching and studying insects. Like Tyler, she was a Girl Scout and received the highest recognition, the Gold Award. She inherited her adventurous spirit from her mother, with whom she went backpacking in Central America. It was no surprise that Tyler knew she was his soulmate upon meeting her, As a student, Sarah excelled not only academically, but also in leading student projects aimed at improving school life. Her positive leadership and inclination earned her the prestigious Truman Scholarship while still at Washington High School in Washington, Missouri. This scholarship led her to Truman State University, where she met Tyler. They fell in love, started dating, and she readily accepted his marriage proposal. Both Tyler's and Sarah's families supported their decision to marry, as it was evident that they were perfect for each other and destined to build a beautiful family together. On Saturday, June 22, 2002, friends and family of Tyler and Sarah began arriving, elegantly dressed, at St. John Lutheran Church, located in Cedar Falls. The guests took their seats as directed by the wedding organizers. Seated at the front were Tyler's parents and Sarah's mother with her siblings. Nearby were Tyler's uncles and cousins. Outside the church, Sarah waited to make her entrance, accompanied by her father, who was ready to walk her down the aisle and give her away to her future husband. That day, Tyler and Sarah, both 22 years old, exchanged vows and promised to stay together until death parted them. Their shared love for nature led them to choose Boundary Waters, a well-known wilderness area on the border between the United States and Canada, specifically between Minnesota and Ontario, as the destination for their 10-day honeymoon. In the first decade of their marriage, Tyler and Sarah focused on achieving economic stability and furthering their professional careers. After earning their bachelor's degrees in Missouri, the couple moved to Lawrence to pursue their respective master's degrees at the University of Kansas, where Sarah eventually worked. As a computer science expert, Tyler worked for a supermarket, a delivery company, and UPS. He also spent 18 years at a company specializing in business-to-business billing and payments. Beyond their professional commitments, the early years of the Schmidts' marriage were filled with adventures. They always found ways to spend time together and explore new natural destinations. They frequently gathered with family or friends to enjoy their shared love of board games. Occasionally, they participated in activities organized by members of the Lutheran Church and, as avid fans of the Kansas Jayhawks, supported the basketball tournaments held at the Allen Fieldhouse. The year 2013 was bittersweet for the couple. On one hand, Sarah's father passed away from a heart attack, a significant loss for his loved ones. On the other hand, after 11 years of marriage, the couple welcomed their first child, Arlo. 3 years later, on September 17, 2015, they experienced the joy of parenthood again with the birth of a beautiful daughter, Lula Schmidt. When Arlo was 6 and Lula was 3, the family moved to Cedar Falls to be closer to Tyler's relatives. Cedar Falls welcomed them warmly, and they soon became active members of the community. Tyler continued working as a software engineer while Sarah started working as an assistant at the city's public library, and the children enrolled in Lincoln Elementary School's preschool. Tyler and Sarah were known for their kindness and willingness to help others, making everyone around them feel important. This commitment earned them the affection of their neighbors and the entire community. The same was true at the library where Sarah worked. Her warmth and friendly demeanor quickly made her well known and appreciated both inside and outside the library. The couple made sure to instill in Arlo and Lula the same passion they had for outdoor activities and nature. In 2021, they began camping with their children, and despite their busy schedules, the children loved these outings so much that the parents made time for them whenever possible. By mid-2022, Sarah was working long hours. Nevertheless, in June, she took a day off to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary and planned to take another day in July to go on a family vacation. She had to finish a project for the library before July 26th, but was determined not to let it interfere with the family's plans. During the week of July 11th, Sarah mentioned to Caddy, her brother Adam's wife, that she would be camping with the children at Maquoketa Cave State Park, a popular destination for hikers and explorers in Jackson County, Iowa, famous for its 13 impressive caves and stunning natural landscapes. On Thursday, July 21st, the family packed their car and drove roughly 140 miles to reach Maquoketa Caves. Tyler and Sarah, both 42, along with their children Arlo, 9, and Lula, 7, arrived at the campsite before 5 p.m. The camping area was packed, so the Scheimitz set up near the park's entrance. A few hours later, around 7 p.m., another family parked about 200 feet from their tent. This was Joe and Cecilia Sherwin, and their 23-year-old son, Anthony Sherwin, from Nebraska. The Sherwins set up 2 tents, one for the parents and another for their son. They were on their way home after a week-and-a-half camping trip that took them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. The journey had been enjoyable and had strengthened the bond between Joe, Cecilia, and Anthony. Anthony was always attentive to his parents' needs, and his mother often said he was the best son she could have wished for, kind, sensitive, and an exceptional student. That year, Anthony was working on a computerized system to support a business he claimed was worth millions. He mentioned that part of the profits would be used to help his parents financially. Cecilia knew little about the project because Anthony kept the details of the mysterious business to himself, only mentioning that he sent emails under strict security. As night fell at Maquoketa Caves, the campers settled into their tents. Before dawn on July 22nd, the park's visitors were jolted awake by the sound of gunshots. Just before the commotion, a man dressed in black entered the Schmitz tent and attacked Tyler and then Sarah. Arlo, who had been asleep, woke up to the sound of his sister Lula's screams. As he turned, he saw blood inside the tent. Terrified, he managed to escape and ran to seek help. As he fled, he heard one last shot. Cecilia and Joe, in the neighboring campsite, rushed out of their tent amid the confusion. Joe searched for his son among the campers, asking if anyone had seen him. Arlo, still frantic, ran until he encountered the Sherwins. He was screaming and asking for help, saying his parents had been shot. Cecilia took his hand and ran with him to the park entrance. Once there, terrified and unsure of what had happened, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. She was worried because her son was sleeping near the tent where the shots had come from and feared he might be among the victims. The Jackson County 911 operator understood when Cecilia reported hearing gunshots, but she struggled to pronounce the park's name, making it hard to convey the location. She also explained she was with a boy claiming his parents had been shot. The call between Cecilia and 911 lasted 23 minutes. While she answered questions, the operator relayed the attack to the police and park rangers. Although the call was briefly disconnected, Cecilia persisted and called back, only to be put on hold while the dispatcher contacted emergency responders. Despite the tension and nervousness in the park, adrenaline helped Cecilia stay calm. After providing details about their exact location, she handed the phone to Arlo. The boy explained to the dispatcher that he was in a tent with his mom, sister, and dad, and when he woke up, he saw someone dressed in black holding a gun. The 911 operator asked the child where his father was, and after a pause, he responded that he thought his father was hurt. Around 6:30 a.m., police officers and paramedics arrived at the scene and headed to the Schmitz tent. What they found was horrifying. All the occupants of the tent were dead. The beautiful campsite had turned into a crime scene. Law enforcement immediately began searching for the shooter, knowing he could be anywhere. The tactical team quickly evacuated Makokeda Caves, State Park, and Camp Shalom, a Christian summer camp located about 1.5 miles from the site of the attack. As officials evacuated the visitors, they gathered them outside the park. Once everyone was accounted for, it was confirmed that only one person was missing: Anthony Sherwin. He was not only missing but also armed. At 11 a.m., police officers conducting an aerial search spotted a man's body. When they reached him, they found he was deceased. It was Anthony. Although investigations were necessary, the police identified him as the suspect in the homicides. They believed he had committed the deadly attack on the Schmidts and then taken his own life. The incident led authorities to close the park, a measure that remained in effect until July 28th. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources expressed its condolences for the incident. Their spokesperson issued a statement saying she and the entire team were devastated by the event, which had shaken the tradition of enjoying the state's natural wonders. But the legacy would continue for the millions of families who recreate in Iowa's parks. When citizens of Cedar Falls heard the news, they were shocked. The atmosphere changed suddenly, as if a gray veil had covered the sky. The reactions of family, friends, acquaintances, and even those who didn't know the victims were filled with pain. Cedar Falls was in mourning. In one of the windows of the Cedar Falls Public Library where Sarah worked, a sign was placed with a message saying that Tyler, Sarah, and Lula had left too soon but would always be in their hearts. The company where Tyler worked as a software engineer issued a statement describing him as a consummate professional and a mentor to his colleagues who were devastated when they heard about the tragedy. They knew of the love Tyler had for his children and his dedication to sharing his knowledge with little Arlo. The mayor of Cedar Falls also expressed his devastation over the loss of 3 beloved community members on his Facebook wall. He knew Sarah well as they had worked together on a tech project. The mayor also urged the residents of Cedar Falls to be generous towards Arlo, the sole survivor of the family, who was safe, and he shared a GoFundMe link for those wishing to donate. Within a few days, the initiative had raised over $276,000. In response to the tragedy, the local authority ordered the closure of the library for the rest of the day out of respect for Sarah's co-workers. The tragedy also elicited reactions from other political leaders. Iowa governor expressed her horror at the attack and sorrow for the unimaginable tragedy. And a U.S. House representative from Iowa tweeted that it was a senseless and horrific crime. Sarah's family was heartbroken. Her sister said she felt her life had been shattered, unable to believe that Sarah would no longer be just a phone call away and that she wouldn't see her niece grow up. Sarah's family traveled from North Dakota, Texas, and Michigan to join the rest of the family for the private funeral service held at Greenwood Cemetery. On August 2nd, a gathering was held to celebrate the lives of Tyler, Sarah, and Lula at the picnic area of Overman Park. More than 200 people attended. Several attendees, including Tyler's aunt and the mayor, spoke at the podium set up for the occasion, sharing their feelings and memories of the deceased. The mayor concluded the speeches by confessing that he had once envisioned Sarah, with her heart dedicated to the community, representing Cedar Falls politically in the future. While the loved ones of the Schmidts dealt with their grief and tried to provide comfort and attention to Arlo, authorities continued their investigation into the horrific crime. According to information released by the Iowa Department of Public Safety, based on autopsy findings, Tyler had a gunshot wound and multiple sharp force injuries. His wife Sarah had only sharp force injuries while their young daughter had been both shot and strangled. In early August 2022, authorities released official information on the case, naming Anthony Sherwin as the person responsible for the Schmidt family's murder. According to the police, the 23-year-old, who had no prior criminal record, was the sole person involved in the incident before taking his own life. The investigation did not reveal any motive for the attack. The assistant director of the Division of Criminal Investigation stated that no connection was established between Anthony and the Schmidt family prior to that fateful day or during their time as neighboring campers. The police department in Nebraska assisted with the investigation. When officers searched the Sherwin family apartment in Nebraska, they found no suicide note or any indication that could explain why Anthony targeted the Schmidt family and himself. His Facebook page was also void of any clues, as it was completely blank. Regarding the weapons used by the attacker, the assistant director of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation mentioned only one: a hand-assembled firearm which was recovered near Anthony's body. These types of weapons, also known as ghost guns, are built by individuals, often using parts purchased online without any restrictions. Since they lack serial numbers, they are difficult to regulate and trace. Seeking to confirm this information, the Des Moines Register contacted Anthony's parents, who confirmed that their son had built his own weapon using information found online. They explained that he did it as a challenge rather than out of a specific desire to own a gun. They also emphasized that Anthony was very responsible and had never harmed another person or animal. Cecilia asserted that their family had never owned guns and that they had decided to acquire them due to the rising crime rates in Nebraska. She added that, due to their lack of experience, they even took classes to learn how to handle them. The parents explained that they brought the homemade gun on the trip for protection against crime and possibly bear attacks, as they had experienced one night while camping. They also mentioned their intention to dispose of it upon returning home. Anthony's parents set out to prove their son's innocence, convinced that he was a victim of homicide and not the killer. According to Anthony's mother, an independently obtained autopsy report indicated that he had been shot twice, not once as claimed by the police. She suspected that the first shot was meant to incapacitate him, but she could not understand how he managed to shoot himself a second time, challenging the authorities' theory of suicide. Another point they raised was the color of the clothing the attacker was wearing. Cecilia recalled telling the 911 operator that the assailant was dressed in black, which did not match what her son was wearing: green shorts she had given him the day before the tragedy. Additionally, Cecilia and Joe reported that the police did not disclose where Anthony's body was found or whether the weapon he allegedly used to take his own life was the same one used against the Schmidts. When they specifically asked investigators if a ballistic test had been conducted to confirm matches, they received no answers. All these concerns were outlined in an email Cecilia sent to the media. In the message, she stated that her son had too many reasons to live and she was certain he would not abandon everything in such a manner. They had not seen any signs of him planning such an attack. In her opinion, Anthony was incapable of killing and had no connection to the Schmidt family. According to the grieving mother, the investigators only responded that it was a random murder. Anthony's parents requested the final investigation report to commission an independent review, but claimed they received no response to this request. In January 2023, a media outlet reported that it had requested public records of the case, adhering to Iowa's Open Records Law and the Freedom of Information Act. The request referenced incident reports, investigation documents, crime scene summaries, and autopsy reports. Devin McClone, from the Office of the Iowa Department of Public Safety Commissioner, responded that the requested records were not public and they could only share the immediate facts and circumstances of the case, which were included in the links provided in the press release. A few days later, the media outlet sent an email to the official, inquiring whether the weapon Anthony used to take his own life matched the one used in the murders. She did not respond. Unless new evidence surfaces to the contrary, the police maintain that Anthony Sherwin was a random killer who viciously shot, stabbed, and strangled 3 beloved members of a Cedar Falls family. In contrast to Cecilia and Joe, their son, whom they described as a kind and studious individual, is innocent and another murder victim. They vow to continue their efforts to prove his innocence. After his traumatic experience, Arlo, the only survivor of the massacre, was taken in by his family in Cedar Falls, specifically Sarah's brother. In an exclusive interview with a local newspaper, Sarah's brother stated that his nephew had been very brave and was in excellent mental health. The GoFundMe page created after the tragedy continues to receive donations to support Arlo's upbringing and to establish an educational fund for his future. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Born on November 1, 2005 in Scotland, Amber Gibson was the second child of Anne Marie Adams and Peter Gibson. She joined the family 2 years after the birth of their first child, Connor Gibson. Amber, a beautiful red-haired baby, contrasted sharply with her brother, who had fair skin and dark hair. Their striking looks and cheerful personalities made them stand out. However, their home was marred by domestic violence. From a tender age, Amber and Connor witnessed their father's abusive behavior towards their mother. Peter's violence knew no bounds, causing physical, emotional, and mental harm to Anne Marie. He also had a criminal history, which included assaults on 2 minors and the abuse of an unknown woman. Due to these dire circumstances, both Amber and Connor were removed from their parental home and placed in the care of social services. After a thorough evaluation, they were relocated to live with the Niven family. Craig and Carol Niven, along with their 2 daughters, provided a nurturing and harmonious environment. This new home offered Amber and Connor a chance for a loving and dignified life, far removed from their troubled beginnings. At the ages of 3 and 5, respectively, Amber and Connor found solace and security with the Nivens. Connor even reassured Amber, saying they were finally safe. Meanwhile, their biological father, Peter, was convicted and sentenced to prison for his crimes. Craig and Carol Niven committed themselves to being exemplary parents. Their dedication led to the permanent custody of both children. Despite this positive change, Connor's past trauma began to manifest as he entered adolescence. Hoping it was just a phase, Craig and Carol took steps to address his needs, including enrolling him in a secondary school for children with social, emotional, and behavioral difficulties. Amber, in contrast, was flourishing. She displayed remarkable human qualities despite her early hardships. Generous, caring, and kind-hearted, Amber had an incredible perspective on life. She loved art and singing and attended Morehouse Academy Bathgate. Her teachers and classmates admired her brilliance and vivacity, noting her big dreams and aspirations for the future. Amber's adoptive parents couldn't have been more pleased, and her foster sisters, Zero, were equally happy to have her around. However, Connor's behavior became increasingly concerning. Former classmates described him as unpleasant and noted that he spoke about harming others. There were even rumors that he had threatened a baby during that period. At home, things were no better. Craig eventually decided that leaving Connor alone with his younger sister was not advisable. He mentioned that they were not a good combination together, but never elaborated further. Despite the conflicts, Amber remained loyal to her brother, always trying to keep the peace. Then, an unexplained event occurred. Although Amber seemed like an ideal foster child, at 14, the care arrangement was terminated, and she moved to the Hill House Children's Unit in Hamilton. Paradoxically, her problematic brother stayed with the Nivens for another 2 years until he turned 18. Shortly after, Connor moved to the Blue Triangle homeless shelter. Despite the distance, Amber ensured that Connor remained a constant presence in her life. When Amber was 16, she crossed paths with Jamie Stars, a 20-year-old leading a chaotic lifestyle, living just 3 miles from her new residence. Jamie had been removed from his parents' care at 3 years old and had led a troubled life, including substance abuse and criminal behavior. In May 2021, Jamie assaulted a young woman in the area. Taking advantage of her intoxicated state, he proceeded without her consent. When the victim reported the assault to the authorities, Jamie sent threatening messages to her friend via social media, attempting to coerce her into withdrawing the complaint. Despite the friend's testimony, his identity was legally protected. Jamie was charged with the assault and attempting to pervert the course of justice, resulting in his arrest. However, he was soon released on bail. In June 2021, Amber traveled to Bothwell, the place where Jamie lived. Although she didn't know Jamie, they ended up in the same lodging unit. That night, while Amber was asleep, Jamie attacked and assaulted her. Amber awoke to find herself undressed, with Jamie, also naked, beside her. She had no recollection of embracing or kissing him, leading to speculation that he might have drugged her, though no tests were conducted to confirm this. Gathering her courage, Amber reported the assault to the police. She identified Jamie from a photo lineup. The police started investigating the case. In July, Jamie faced justice again. Witnesses included the Amber and the first victim. Their testimonies revealed Jamie's method of preying on vulnerable girls. Jamie appeared in court via video link from police custody. His defense argued that his actions might be linked to his traumatic childhood. However, acknowledging his difficult past, the High Court judged him for his poor choices. Jamie was found guilty of both assaults, his name added indefinitely to the sex offender registry. He was also convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice and breaching bail conditions. The sentencing hearing at the High Court in Edinburgh soon followed. One of the first to speak was the defense attorney, who emphasized that the authorities should consider the sentencing guidelines for individuals under 25 years old. In Scotland, the law suggests that younger people should receive lighter sentences due to their emotional immaturity and higher potential for rehabilitation. To support his argument, the defense lawyer pointed out a report indicating that Jamie exhibited cognitive and emotional immaturity. After hearing the defense's case, the judge acknowledged the relevance of Jamie's age and difficult background. However, he reminded Jamie and everyone in attendance that the crimes were still severe, even describing them as atrocious due to their impact on innocent victims. Consequently, the judge sentenced Jamie to 10.5 years in prison. Moreover, given the high risk of reoffending, Jamie was ordered to be under supervision for 2 years following his release. After the hearing, the police stated that the evidence and testimony provided by Amber were crucial in securing the conviction. Throughout this challenging process, Connor reached out to the Hill House Children's Unit to talk to his sister. Despite knowing his volatile temperament, Amber clung to the hope of reconnecting with her only available family member. The residence manager tried to discourage her from contacting Connor, but her efforts were in vain. Amber's close friend recalled that, despite their turbulent relationship, Amber had a special bond with Connor and was eager to see him. However, just as suddenly as he appeared, he disappeared, leaving her with unanswered questions. Amber tried to move forward with her life as best as she could, demonstrating an enviable spirit and determination. After a few months, Connor resurfaced. Likely driven by genuine affection for her only biological family member, Amber was excited when he expressed his desire to meet. They arranged a time and date and met in downtown Hamilton on the night of Friday, November 26, 2021. Overjoyed by her brother's presence, Amber took a selfie with him and posted it on her social media profile. It was the last time anyone heard from her. Around 10 p.m., security cameras captured the siblings walking together through the streets of Hamilton. At some point, out of the camera's view, Connor attacked Amber. He assaulted her, inflicted severe head and body injuries, and then strangled her until she died. About 90 minutes later, without attempting to hide the body, Connor headed back to the hostel where he was staying. Security cameras recorded his disheveled state, and footage showed him collapsing against a metal barrier. He eventually pulled himself together and disposed of his blood-stained clothes. Just before midnight, he returned to the hostel and told a staff member that he and his sister had argued. Later, another camera showed Connor going to the dumpsters outside the building with a plastic bucket in hand. He also called the Hill House Children's Unit, telling them not to worry if Amber didn't return, insisting that she was fine. Despite his assurances, the authorities reported Amber missing that same night. On Friday, November 26, 2021, retired William Corrigan took his 45-year-old son, Stephen Corrigan, to get a COVID-19 vaccine. Due to a recent fall, Stephen had his arm in a sling and needed extra support from his father. After getting vaccinated, Stephen decided to take a night walk and stumbled upon Amber's abandoned body. Rather than alerting the police, Stephen committed his own heinous acts by desecrating Amber's remains. He then concealed her body among leaves and bushes before leaving. Unaware of Amber's tragic fate, her loved ones and the authorities searched for her everywhere. Meanwhile, Connor sent a cryptic message to a group of 5 friends, saying he needed help with something without specifying details. To create an alibi, he messaged Amber, asking if she was okay. He then told his friends that he had resolved the issue on his own. As the search for Amber continued, Craig and Carol grew increasingly anxious. They hadn't heard from Connor until a call on Sunday, November 28, 2021, when he told them that he and Amber had fought the previous Friday. Later that same Sunday, the police finally discovered Amber's body. Her underwear had been torn, and she had suffered severe head trauma. After securing the scene, investigators searched the area and found Amber's blood-stained shorts and t-shirt in a nearby dumpster. After informing her loved ones of the tragic outcome, the detective team began reconstructing Amber's movements from the last time she was seen to when her life was taken and her body left in the middle of nowhere. At a press conference, one of the detectives appealed to the public for information. He emphasized the importance of understanding the events leading to Amber's fatal attack and urged anyone with information to come forward to help bring closure to her family. Knowing the community's fear and parents' concerns for their daughter's safety, he stressed that capturing the perpetrator was crucial for public safety. He pointed out that Amber was last seen in a busy part of town on a Friday night, suggesting there must have been many witnesses. He called on anyone who saw her to contact the authorities. Following the press conference, some people came forward with potential information, but none provided useful leads. Investigators continued their work, and the forensic pathologist's report highlighted that Amber was found covered in mud and had died from neck compression. Bloodstains found on her jacket were sent for DNA analysis, which revealed a chilling truth. The blood matched her brother Connor's DNA. Additionally, Connor's DNA was found on Amber's forcibly removed underwear. Another unidentified male DNA sample was also discovered, complicating the case further. With such evidence in hand, Connor became the prime suspect in the case. He continued to feign innocence and create false alibis that quickly fell apart. One such clumsy attempt was a social media post on December 1st, where he pretended to pay tribute to his sister, lavishing her with praise and claiming he would miss her dearly. The next day, he searched the internet on his phone for ways to mislead the police. He also posted several angry messages on his social media accounts. Hours later, he was arrested. Meanwhile, the details of the case were kept under strict confidentiality to avoid jeopardizing the investigation. However, some information leaked, and it became known that the victim's brother was under police scrutiny. Feeling the pressure from the police, Connor did not give up trying to distance himself from the crime. Instead, he pushed a local media outlet to publish a tribute to his sister. Forensic DNA analyses and other evidence continued to provide valuable information at a rapid pace. It was determined that Connor's clothing had traces of his sister's blood. Additionally, the analysis revealed that the third biological material belonged to Stephen Corrigan. A cybercrime expert analyzed Connor's phone and uncovered further evidence that clarified the case. Suspicious messages to his group of 5 friends and the one sent to Amber, knowing he had just killed her, were particularly incriminating. His internet search history only further exposed him. As these details began to emerge publicly, the complex story of Amber's tragic end came to light. Connor had to appear in Hamilton Sheriff Court to face charges of murder, sexual assault, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. Prosecutors stated that Amber had complete trust in her brother, which he brutally betrayed by taking her life. The court ruled that Connor should remain in police custody pending further investigations and court appearances. Stephen Corrigan was also arrested shortly thereafter. On January 13, 2022, he appeared in Hamilton Sheriff Court, charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice. He pleaded not guilty. Like Connor, Stephen was held in police custody awaiting his trial. The year 2022 was filled with legal proceedings, making it an extremely challenging time for Carol and her husband Craig, who were grappling with the grief of losing Amber and the shock of Connor's possible guilt. On November 1st, 2022, which would have been Amber's 17th birthday, her friends and family celebrated her memory. They shared heartfelt messages and wishes for her eternal rest, along with photos of her on social media. Carol changed her profile picture to one of Amber, finding a measure of peace in the gesture, feeling that it symbolized having done everything possible for her. Additionally, Amber's loved ones created a memorial under a bridge near where her body was found. They placed bouquets, balloons, and candles in her honor. Unfortunately, the memorial was vandalized a few days later when vandals set fire to a nearby dumpster, causing flames to spread. In response, family and friends held a gathering in a park, releasing balloons, some shaped like the letter A for Amber, into the sky. While the wound from Amber's loss remained fresh, Conor's trial finally took place in July 2023. Throughout the trial, Conor denied any involvement in the crime and the sexual assault against his sister. Despite his denials, the evidence against him was overwhelming. His defense lawyer attempted to garner some sympathy from the court by highlighting Conor's lifelong neglect and emotional abuse, suggesting these factors could explain some of his actions. Next, the Director of Health and Social Care testified, describing the case as desperately sad and distressing. The court also heard that Conor appeared unshaken when speaking with Craig on the day Amber's body was found. Craig testified about Conor's increasingly problematic behavior. After a 13-day trial, the Glasgow High Court found Conor guilty of all 3 charges. The judge described the crime as depraved and warned Conor that he would face severe consequences. 15 days later, Stephen faced justice for his involvement. During his trial, he tried to present an unassailable alibi, claiming he spent the night at his elderly father's home and had spent much of the time playing computer games. However, the evidence against him continued to mount. Stephen also claimed that he didn't know why his DNA was found on Amber's body. While William corroborated much of his son's account, he admitted to the jury that he couldn't be certain of Stephen's actions during most of that weekend. Ultimately, Stephen was found guilty of attempting to pervert the course of justice and disturbing public order. In September 2023, during a joint hearing, both men received their sentences. Conor Gibson was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years before he can be considered for parole. Stephen received a 9-year prison sentence. In a statement following the trial, Craig and Carol acknowledged that their lives would never be the same. They described Amber as the most generous, caring, compassionate, and admirable person they had ever known. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
I stripped his clothes. I cut open his belly to see his guts. They're really pink. Sorry, that was morbid. Then I cut off his head. I gave him a Glasgow smile. But a Joker smile.
Little is known about Brian's childhood because his parents and lawyers made concerted efforts to protect many of his personal details. However, by piecing together information revealed during his 2023 trial, we can sketch a rough profile. Brian was born in 2002 and exhibited an early interest in death-related topics. He had a history of animal abuse and derived pleasure from watching particularly gory content. The timeless question in such cases is this: did exposure to morbid material shape his personality, or was he inherently inclined toward darkness, with violent videos and games simply amplifying his existing tendencies? As Brian reached secondary school, certain disorders became apparent. He experienced severe mood swings and often preferred isolation when his peers were socializing. He rarely attended parties and had a notably cynical attitude. At 15, a family doctor diagnosed him with depression after a series of consultations. A few years later, he complained of severe headaches, prompting a CT scan to rule out clots, tumors, or other abnormalities. The results were normal, but the migraines persisted, causing him ongoing distress. Despite his evident frustration with these medical treatments, Brian remained cooperative, often ending each consultation with a resigned, half-hearted smile. Psychotic disorders were ruled out, but other concerning behaviors emerged. A counselor, contacted by Brian's mother to help him cope with the death of an uncle, observed that Brian showed little empathy for the loss. He admitted he was tired of pretending to feel sad about things that didn't affect him. Over time, Brian's counselor noted his constant questioning of why hurting or stealing was wrong, indicating a disturbing lack of moral understanding. He displayed no empathy for minorities, regarding transgender individuals as less than human. It became evident that Brian harbored a significant, concealed hatred. On multiple occasions, he was known to exploit the vulnerabilities of his peers to mock them. All these observations paint a troubling picture of Brian's mental and emotional state, despite his mother's persistent efforts to seek help for him. Before turning 18, Brian visited the Vocational Rehabilitation Division. The reason was that he claimed he couldn't comprehend how his decisions impacted his future or the lives of those around him. During this time, a third doctor met with him and asked about his future goals. Brian quickly listed his key influences: Adolf Hitler, Columbine shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, serial killer Ted Bundy, and former Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin. The doctor, unfazed, took notes and quickly diagnosed Brian with a low level of autism. She requested further tests to explore his darker thoughts. However, Brian soon found a job, and many of these tests were never conducted. Could these tests have predicted what Brian was about to do? That's a question that remains unanswered. Brian spent several months working various roles at a supermarket chain. One afternoon, he confided in a co-worker that he believed he had no friends and never would. The co-worker smiled and reassured him that everyone there was his friend. "They're only my friends out of pity," Brian replied before getting up and continuing with his tasks. In a way, his comment held some truth. Everyone around Brian felt a mix of concern and pity for him. Despite his outbursts of anger, he seemed to be in emotional pain and frequently sighed. Many saw him as a ticking time bomb, though no one expected what he would eventually do. From what has been revealed, Brian's mother was particularly worried about his well-being. She constantly sought out professionals who could help him and showed concern whenever someone spoke about him. However, after the incident, many agreed that it was in the privacy of his home where Brian's cries for help were no longer heard. Brian's parents admitted that at some point, talking about crimes became an uncontrollable obsession for him. Whether during dinners, family gatherings, or outings, Brian always found an excuse to bring up the topic. He would directly and unambiguously declare that he was planning to kill someone. But Brian's parents, either out of negligence or an inability to accept the truth, convinced themselves he was joking. They even tried to reassure each other, suggesting that Brian's obsession might be the precursor to a career as a forensic investigator or police officer. In their more optimistic moments, they envisioned their son solving crimes or conducting autopsies that would uncover mysteries. However, their optimism would falter when Brian sat in front of them, grinning from ear to ear, and casually discussed ways to dispose of a body. Though his words frightened them, Brian would quickly dismiss their fears by claiming he was merely showcasing his dark sense of humor. He would then head off to work, leaving his parents with a lingering chill. That chill grew more intense as other troubling signs emerged. In the last days of February 2021, Brian's mother felt a spontaneous sense of relief. For over a week, Brian hardly mentioned anything about murders or dismemberments. He seemed more talkative about everyday matters, asking about their work and showing interest in household affairs. He even appeared enthusiastic about his future. His mother recalled the doctor's words, suggesting that Brian's fascination with death might be a phase that would suddenly vanish. But Brian's father was not so convinced. He suspected this newfound calm might be the proverbial quiet before the storm. In hindsight, he wasn't wrong. The storm was just beginning. On the last day of February, Brian's father got into the car that Brian often borrowed and found a wallet under the seat. It was clear at first glance that the wallet didn't belong to any family member. His initial thought was that it might belong to one of Brian's friends or a girl he had dated, but he knew deep down that Brian didn't socialize much and didn't have an active romantic life. With trembling fingers, he opened the wallet and found a driver's license belonging to a man named Warren Barnes, nearly 70 years old. Why was it there? With his heart pounding and fear gripping him, he nervously confronted Brian, unsure of what chilling revelation might come next. Brian calmly explained that he had found the documents on the street. Noticing his father's paranoia, Brian even joked that if he had killed Warren, he wouldn't be so foolish as to leave incriminating evidence in the car. Oddly enough, this logic seemed to make sense to his father, who reluctantly accepted the explanation. But the uneasy peace lasted only a few hours. Later, Brian's mother found a red stain on the car upholstery. Once again, Brian laughed it off, claiming it was paint from a special effects course he had enrolled in. Desperate to believe him, his parents clung to his explanation, their minds racing with doubt and fear. Were they losing their grip on reality? Were they so afraid of their son becoming a monster that they saw signs where there were none? Did that make them worse monsters than their son? They felt guilty for suspecting the boy they had raised, who clearly needed help and seemed incapable of harming anyone. Their doubts made them feel ashamed. Despite this, Brian's mother couldn't shake her instinct that something was wrong. The next day, she took advantage of his absence to enter his room, later claiming she was just trying to tidy up. Whether that was true or she was searching for secrets waiting to be uncovered, she started looking around. After checking under the bed and in drawers, she opened Brian's closet and found a plastic container with bags inside. The bags emitted a nauseating odor that filled the room, making her stomach churn. As she cautiously approached, she noticed maggots crawling out of the seams, their writhing bodies a horrifying testament to the sinister contents within. Horrified and acting on instinct, she took the bags to the kitchen sink. Fighting back nausea, she opened them with a cloth. What she saw made her nearly faint. Barely able to stand, she made 3 calls. The first was to her husband, asking him to come home immediately. The second was to Brian, telling him to come home no matter what he was doing. They needed to talk. The third call took the most time. She dialed 911 and, through sobs, told the operator she had found a head in her 19-year-old son's closet. The operator assured her help was on the way and urged her to stay calm.
911 is John. What's the address emergency?
Hi, there is an emergency. I found something in my son's closet wrapped in a plastic bag.
Okay, what was it?
I think it's a human head.
It's a what?
I think it's a human head.
Why do you think it's that?
Because it looks like it's all an ear.
Is it bloody or does it like anything like that?
Just can you just come? Do I have to take a picture and send it to you?
What's
Can you
the
just
address?
come?
Is your son there now?
He just pulled up. We wanted to make sure he was here before we called.
How old is he?
19. He's had a little bit of a fascination with the morbid, but he was channeling it, I thought, into becoming a crime scene investigator, but not so much.
When the police arrived, the sequence of events that unfolded was recorded and remains chilling to those who watch it. It's just a few seconds, but enough to make many lose faith in humanity. Brian spoke about what he did with a chilling lack of emotion.
Okay, so parents have some concerns of some stuff they may have found in your room?
Yeah, I believe so.
And what would it be?
A human head and hands.
That same day, he was arrested.
Like I said, I'll get that errand for you.
Sorry about that.
All right.
He was brought to the police station for questioning.
I should have a mask.
You're okay. Don't worry about it, okay? Keep on walking. Keep going. Take
His mother was also subjected to interrogation. After some time, he began to reveal some horrific truths.
I stripped his clothes. I cut open his belly to see his guts. They're really pink. Sorry, that was morbid. Then I cut off his head. I gave him a Glasgow smile. But a Joker smile.
His trial took place nearly 2 years later, in January 2023. On the stand, he repeated what he had told those taking his testimony over the months. Even during his initial confession, he appeared almost happy as he recounted his crime. Brian had decided to bring his homicidal fantasies into reality and devised a plan. From reading about serial killers online, he learned the importance of choosing his victim carefully. To avoid getting caught, he needed to target someone who wouldn't be missed, reducing the risk of immediate suspicion. This led him to conclude that his best option was to kill a prostitute or a homeless person. He began patrolling his neighborhood at night, armed with a kitchen knife, driving slowly and watching intently. He studied locations, times, observed routines, and took notes. Gradually, he identified more isolated areas and the least patrolled blocks. His obsession grew, and by February 27, 2021, he had become a predator on the hunt. That night, Brian found his target, a homeless man sleeping under a bridge near Crossview Avenue. Without hesitation, Brian acted on his sinister plan. He activated the vehicle's hazard lights and stepped out with a determined stride. There was no hesitation or moment of reflection. Brian approached the man sleeping on the ground and attacked decisively, killing him with a knife. According to his account, the victim didn't even wake up. The cuts were so precise that he bled out almost immediately. Once the body stopped convulsing, Brian stood there for a few minutes, watching. As the adrenaline began to subside, doubt crept in. Had he left fibers from his clothes on the body? What if, in the frenzy of the attack, he had left fingerprints? He couldn't allow that to happen. It went against everything he had learned. Ensuring no one was watching, Brian proceeded with what seemed the most logical action in his fevered state. He decapitated the victim and severed his hands, placing these parts into bags. He then put the rest of the body into his car trunk after removing the wallet and other documents from the man's pockets. Brian attempted to sink the car in the Colorado River before returning home. It was early morning by then. He locked himself in his room, his heart still racing. The next day, his parents reported the car missing, and Brian acted as if nothing had happened. He even started showing more affection and connection with those around him, as previously mentioned. In the following days, Brian spent hours drawing maps, selecting locations to dispose of the incriminating bags. But he never got the chance. His mother discovered them first. Ultimately, things didn't go as Brian had planned. Moreover, Brian had chosen his victim poorly. Despite his assumption that the man's disappearance would go unnoticed, the reality was quite the opposite. Warren Barnes, 69, was a well-known figure in that part of town, and everyone had a great deal of affection for him. His disappearance was reported on February 28th by the owner of a bookstore on Crossview Avenue between 4th and 5th Streets. Warren was known for borrowing books every morning with meticulous regularity. When he missed his routine, people became worried.
When was the last time you saw him?
Saturday, 5 o'clock. I said, I'll see you tomorrow, Warren. And he was like, okay, meaning he planned on coming down on Sunday. And then he did not show up.
The Colorado Sun revealed that Warren was known in Grand Junction as the Reading Man. He was a cheerful character who always chatted with neighbors about literature, recommended authors, and engaged in debates. When he saw others feeling down, he would tell them stories to lift their spirits, always parting with a smile and a wish for a good day. Nearby cafe members frequently gave him food and hot drinks, and other shopkeepers left chairs outside their stores for him to sit and read for hours. Occasionally, he did odd jobs around the neighborhood, earning a few bills to keep himself warm when the weather turned harsh. Brian's assumption that Warren's absence would go unnoticed was gravely mistaken. Warren also loved birds and prided himself on recognizing their unique songs. His family had often tried to persuade him to leave his transient lifestyle, but Warren always appreciated their concern while insisting he was content. He enjoyed living simply, respected by everyone around him. Warren believed that despite everything, things could turn out well. He sought nothing more than to have pleasant conversations each day before losing himself in his books and stories. Warren possessed an unusual innocence for his 69 years, devoid of malice and corrosive ambition. Everyone loved Warren. That's why his absence was immediately noticed, and the police were called when he didn't show up as usual. His sister Geraldine recounted how Warren had called her just hours before his death to wish her a happy birthday. He had done so in his cheerful tone, wishing her all her dreams come true. She was the last person he spoke to before lying down under the bridge, never to wake again. During the trial, a group of neighbors requested to testify about who Warren was. They emphasized that not having a home didn't make a person any less valuable or disposable. Two Colorado state psychologists who evaluated Brian for his insanity plea concluded he wasn't insane at the time of the murder. Another psychologist, assessing Brian separately for the defense, argued he had experienced a psychotic episode triggered by the attack on Warren, which subsided shortly afterward. Brian's mother took the stand, expressing her condolences to Warren's family through tears. She asked that Brian's sentence include mental health treatment, insisting her son was more than the sum of his mental defects and actions. She hoped Brian still had a chance to contribute positively to society. "Brian doesn't think or feel like the rest of us," she said, before leaving the courtroom, her voice trembling. A palpable tension filled the room as everyone's eyes turned to the judge. It was time for the verdict. The judge in charge, with 37 years in the judicial system, including 16 as a judge, remarked that this was one of the most horrific cases he had ever encountered. Since Brian had confessed to the crime in detail, his lawyers based their defense on his mental health. They argued that Brian's declaration of wanting to become a famous killer was a sign of his insanity. They also cited his major depressive disorder combined with environmental stressors as factors leading to temporary insanity. However, the prosecution argued the opposite. They claimed Brian had meticulously planned the murder for months and that the dismemberment of the body to hide evidence demonstrated cold, calculated, and meticulous behavior. On February 6, 2023, 20 days after the trial began, the judge delivered a clear decision: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Today, Brian is incarcerated at the Buena Vista Correctional Complex in Colorado. Mesa County Assistant District Attorney Trish Marr conveyed her sorrow over the brutal murder of Warren Barnes. She remarked, "Warren Barnes was taken from us in an incredibly violent manner. His friends, family, and the community deeply feel his absence. This case underscores the checks and balances of our criminal justice system. Justice was served when the jury delivered guilty verdicts, holding the defendant accountable for his atrocious crimes." Meanwhile, in November 2021, a monument was erected in Warren's memory near the main street of Grand Junction. Created by artist Tim Navin, the installation features a chair under the shade of a tree with a stack of books on the seat. Poetically, it serves as a fitting sanctuary. However, the absence of the reading man is still deeply felt in the daily life of the town, which remains shrouded in a bit more sadness following Brian's actions. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.